Mexican cartel threatens a fat truck driver until he opens a mysterious locked compartment. The sun sat low behind the hills of Sonora, painting the desert in hues of fire and rust. A long, battered 18-wheeler rumbled down the lone highway, its steel frame humming like a war drum across the silence. Bugs splattered the windshield. Dust curled behind its tires like the wake of a ship pushing through dead water. Inside the cab, Curtis Maddox, 52, exhaled a tired breath and adjusted the mirrored sunglasses sliding down his nose. He was thick-built, 280 at least, with a belly that pushed against the seatbelt, a beard graying at the edges, and arms like hydraulic pistons. At first glance, you'd peg him as just another overworked, underpaid trucker hauling crap between ports. But first glances lie. Curtis sipped his black coffee from a steel thermos labeled Unsung and tapped twice on the dashboard. It was a quiet ritual. On his lap rested a thick map with pen markings. No GPS, no trackers, no cell signals. Curtis didn't trust tech. Not after what happened in Kandahar. Not after Bravo Base went dark. The trailer behind him was locked tighter than a nuke silo. 2-inch thick walls, triple sealed, no vents, no windows. Just a faint red stencil across the back. H-41, do not open. Authorized access only. Nobody ever asked what was inside. Until today, as he passed the mile 212 marker, Curtis noticed it. A black SUV parked sideways off the shoulder. Windows tinted, engine still warm. The kind of vehicle that doesn't break down. The kind of vehicle that waits. Curtis's fingers tapped the wheel in code. 3 short, 1 long. A memory, not a panic. He didn't brake, didn't slow, but his eyes flicked to the side mirror. 4 more SUVs behind, closing in like wolves. Radio crackled. A voice, thick with a Sinaloan accent, bled through on a private channel. Driver of the white Kenworth, pull over now. This is your only warning. Curtis didn't flinch. He flicked a switch under the dashboard, and the entire rig's interior lighting went dead. Instruments went analog. Then he reached behind the seat and grabbed a small, dusty case. Inside, a tactical M9 sidearm. No digital safety. Suppressor already fitted. Curtis muttered to himself. Figures they'd come sooner or later. He veered right and parked near a cactus field. The SUVs formed a perimeter fast, doors popping open in unison. 8 men exited. Half carried ARs. The other half looked like they preferred machetes. Curtis stepped out calmly, sunglasses still on, holding a handkerchief to wipe sweat. Or maybe buy time. One of the cartel soldiers approached, smug grin on his face. You carry something important, viejo. Time to share. Curtis scratched his beard, looked up slowly. You boys sure you want to do this here? Middle of nowhere? No backup. The leader chuckled. We are the backup. Curtis smiled just once. Good. Then I won't have to clean up twice. He took one deliberate step backward, toward the locked rear compartment. They didn't notice him reach into his back pocket and press a hidden button. The rig gave a faint mechanical click. The wolves had no idea what they'd just stepped into. The cartel enforcers didn't flinch at the sound. To them, it was just metal shifting. Maybe a trailer locking into park. Maybe old hydraulics settling. But Curtis Maddox had built that sound to mean something. A final chance. A last out. The leader, a square-jawed man with mirrored shades and a gold chain that swung when he walked, barked a command in Spanish. 2 of his men flanked Curtis from either side. You open it, or we cut it open. Your choice, old man. Curtis said nothing. He stood perfectly still, left hand resting casually on the edge of the trailer's double doors, the other hand still dabbing at his brow with that old bandana. One of the younger goons got impatient. AR-15 raised. He stepped forward and jabbed the barrel into Curtis's shoulder. You deaf. That was a mistake. Curtis didn't move fast. He moved right. In a single motion, he sidestepped the barrel, twisted the kid's wrist into a clean lock, and slammed him face first into the trailer wall. The kid dropped like a bag of bricks, his rifle clattering against the dirt. Before anyone else could process it, Curtis had drawn the suppressed M9 and held it low, tucked behind his thigh like an afterthought. The rest of the crew raised their weapons, shouting in Spanish and English, scattering into a loose semicircle. Relax, Curtis said deadpan. That was just a love tap. You want me mad, keep pushing. The leader stepped forward again, this time slower. You think you're some kind of hero? This is cartel territory, gringo. You're one truck. We own the roads. You don't walk out of this. Curtis gave a long look at the horizon. The wind had picked up. His voice, calm as dusk, said, I'm not trying to walk out. And then, with his thumb, he unlocked the secondary latch on the trailer. A low hiss followed, hydraulics decompressing. The cartel's laughter stopped. The entire back of the trailer shifted, groaning like a steel beast. The doors didn't open. They split, horizontally, vertically, rotating inward with synchronized precision. From the shadows inside, shapes emerged. Sleek, angular, matte black. At first glance, they looked like storage crates. Until one of them moved. A leg, then another. 2 defensive drones, custom-built. Old DARPA models Curtis had salvaged back in '07, decommissioned, and supposedly destroyed. Each the size of a trash bin, rolling out on motorized treads. Each equipped with active threat recognition optics, armored exteriors, and, courtesy of Curtis, an illegally restored M240B machine gun with rubberized recoil compensation. They spun toward the cartel gunman and locked on. One drone's speaker buzzed to life. Hostile detected. The men stumbled backward, unsure whether to fire or run. Curtis took a deep breath, then muttered to no one in particular. Should have just asked for directions. The drone's targeting lasers painted red dots across 4 chests. The next move belonged to the cartel, but Curtis had already planned 3 steps ahead. This was no longer a robbery. This was a trap. The desert wind whipped through the clearing, carrying silence sharper than the weapons now aimed at the cartel men. Guns didn't fire yet, but they spoke. The twin drones kept steady aim, servo motors humming like predators just out of patience. One of the younger gunmen, nervous, twitchy, all bravado and no training, screamed and raised his rifle to shoot. Curtis didn't give him the chance. The M9 in Curtis's hand snapped twice. Suppressed. Clean. 2 center mass hits. The kid staggered back, rifle falling from limp fingers, and collapsed to his knees before face-planting in the dirt. The others? Now they were thinking. Curtis turned slowly toward the rest, calm, tactical. I've got 2 rules, he said, voice low. First one, don't point guns at me. Second one, don't bring friends who twitch. The leader's face twitched. He raised a hand, calling for restraint. All right. Okay. No more games. Who are you? Curtis stepped forward. Every move controlled. Not rushed. Just inevitable. Name's Maddox. Used to drive things for Uncle Sam that couldn't be tracked. Places that didn't exist on maps. Things that never made the news. He pointed to the trailer. This rig? Modified for high-threat recovery. One-of-a-kind rolling fortress. And I didn't come through this desert by accident. The leader's expression shifted. Calculating. So what's inside? Curtis cracked his neck. Insurance. Before the cartel could react, the drones fired, not at the men, but at their vehicles. Controlled bursts. Tires shredded. Windshields spiderwebbed. Radiators exploded in a hiss of steam. The black SUVs dropped to their frames in seconds, crippled. The gunman flinched, scrambling for cover. One tried to run. Curtis shot the ground near his feet. Next step simpler, Curtis growled. Drop the guns. Kick him over. The silence that followed was thick with decision. The cartel wasn't used to being outmaneuvered. Not here. Not like this. But 5 of them obeyed, tossing weapons away like hot coals. One tried bluffing, pretending to reach for a radio. He didn't get far. Curtis motioned, and one of the drones surged forward with alarming speed, skimming over dirt and rocks like a predator on rails. The man froze. The drone stopped inches from his chest. A speaker crackled. Surrender accepted. Curtis exhaled. Smart choice. But not all of them were that smart. From the tree line, a sound, Heartwarming, a new vehicle. Not SUV. Dirt bike. One rider, helmeted, zipped across the low ridge like a shadow on wheels. Curtis's eyes narrowed. Spotter, he said. They're calling for backup. He grabbed a remote from his belt and tapped twice. One of the drones swiveled instantly, locked onto the fleeing biker, and launched forward. Puffs of dust rose in its wake as it gave chase, guided by infrared and predictive pathing. Curtis holstered the M9, then turned to the disarmed men. You've got maybe 5 minutes before the next wave arrives. You can run, or you can tell me what your boss is really looking for. The leader, still standing tall, spat in the dirt. You're dead either way, viejo. You just don't know it yet. Curtis gave him a half smile, cold and professional. Funny, I was going to say the same to you. The disarmed cartel men sat in the dirt, hands raised, eyes flicking between Curtis and the open trailer, now humming faintly as its internal systems powered up. The drone that chased the biker had vanished into the low hills, its path only traceable by the rooster tail of dust it left behind. Curtis tapped his boot against the closest SUV's bumper, flattened, steaming, and turned his focus back to the leader. Last chance. What's your crew doing out here? The leader stayed silent. Chin up. Loyal. Or scared? Curtis nodded, as if expecting the answer. You're not the tip of the spear. You're just the feelers. He turned, walked toward the rig's front cab, and opened a weather-sealed case behind the passenger seat. Inside was an old field laptop, hardened casing, solar-charged. He booted it up with a biometric scan. A secure tactical network blinked online, one Curtis had kept alive long after retirement. Come on, he muttered, fingers flying across the keys. Satellite overlay flickered onto the screen. Red dots marked vehicle movement in a wide radius. 5 new blips appeared west of his location, moving fast. Armored. Big. Convoy, he said under his breath. Heavy. A message pinged in a ghost network he hadn't touched in years. Line of green code. One phrase. Valkyrie awake. Curtis stared at it for a beat, jaw tight. That phrase hadn't been used since Jakarta. He typed back. Valkyrie, eyes open. Then he closed the laptop, locked it, and returned to the cartel leader. You've got 2 options, amigo. You can stay here and explain to your friends why 6 trucks of dead weight ain't moving anymore. Or you can tell me what's inside that ridge compound 3 clicks north. Now the leader hesitated. He blinked. Once. That was enough. Curtis stepped forward, closer, controlled, and pulled a tactical blade from his belt sheath. You're not scared of me, but you're scared of whoever sent you. I know that look. So here's the problem. He leaned in. I'm worse than the people you work for. The difference is, I'm fair. The leader's mask cracked. A bead of sweat rolled from his temple. They said a transfer was coming through. Something valuable. Not drugs. Not guns. Higher level. Whisper was it's a prototype. Something American. You're the mule. Curtis stared, unmoving. They have a facility built into the rock. Used to be mining tunnels. Now it's reinforced. Full platoon guarding it. They thought you'd take the bait and run south. Curtis grunted. I ran west. I always run west. Harder to track in the light. He glanced toward the horizon. Dust trails. 5 vehicles. ETA, for minutes. Curtis barked an order into his watch. Valkyrie mode, partial deploy. From the back of the trailer, for hidden panels opened. 2 telescoping mounts rose up, like towers unfolding from a fortress wall. Each held an active drone cradle, humming as systems warmed. The sun caught the corner of his mirrored sunglasses as Curtis stepped between the trailer and the disarmed men. Tell your friends they just lost the first move. And then, from behind the ridge, the enemy convoy came into view. Curtis crouched beside the front tire of the rig, his eyes narrowed behind polarized lenses as the enemy convoy crested the ridge, 5 vehicles in tight formation, headlights off despite the dying sun. 3 modified technicals with mounted guns, a reinforced Humvee at the center, and a boxy troop carrier in the rear. They weren't here to intimidate. They were here to clean up. He tapped once on the side of the trailer. The drone towers locked into position with a hydraulic hiss. One launched skyward, a recon unit with infrared sweep and jamming capabilities. The other pivoted eastward, locking onto the lead technical. Let's see how blind you boys are when your eyes go dark, Curtis muttered. He tapped the control on his wrist once. The recon drone activated midair, broadcasting an electronic countermeasure pulse across a 400-meter radius. The convoy's lead technical swerved slightly, its targeting system disrupted. Red error symbols blinked on several dashboards, unnoticed by the men gripping rifles in the back. Curtis switched to voice comms. Drone 1, paint targets and prioritize mobile turrets. Drone 2, lock down rear transport. A pair of red laser dots danced across the nearest truck. The enemy didn't notice. Fire control, authorized. Twin bursts exploded from the trailer-mounted turrets. Tight, controlled bursts of 7.62. One vehicle's engine block erupted in sparks. Another's tires shredded violently, sending it skidding sideways into a cactus patch. Screams followed. Curtis moved with methodical calm. He ducked beneath the rig and rolled to the opposite side, pulling open a disguised panel under the fuel tank. From it, he retrieved a short-barreled SCAR rifle and a foldable suppressor. Locked. Loaded. Let's take the fight off the truck. The enemy squad, now panicked but trained, spread out. 4 men leapt from the middle Humvee, moving into staggered positions with ARs aimed high. They scanned the open field, still no sign of the shooter. Curtis was already 10 yards into the cactus grove, ghosting through the brush like a veteran sniper. He didn't need speed. He needed position. A cartel gunman approached the wrecked technical, too close. Pop pop. Curtis dropped him instantly. One chest. One head. From the ridge, a machine gun barked. Curtis dove behind a flat boulder as bullets chewed through dry dirt. He peeked, clocked the gunner's profile, then whispered, "You don't see me, but I see you." Drone 1 swooped low, quiet as a whisper. It deployed a microcharge, clipped to the back of the mounted gun with a magnet. 2 seconds later, whoomph. The gun detonated, its operator launched backward like a rag doll. In the confusion, Curtis advanced. 2 controlled shots. Another down. Tactics, he muttered to himself, not bravado. The boxy troop carrier opened wide. 6 new fighters stormed out, better armed, coordinated. Not local muscle. These were PMCs, former military. Eyes sharp, movements precise. Curtis grimaced. Outsourced muscle. Somebody's throwing real money at this. He dropped back behind a berm and radioed the drone tower. Activate last line. Behind the trailer, something stirred. A third drone. Larger. Older. Painted desert tan. Its label still read, Mule, 5 deployed. Marja. Curtis smiled. Welcome back, old friend. Dust lifted like smoke as the third drone fully activated, its heavy treads digging into the dry terrain. The Mule, 5 wasn't elegant, just a square-bodied combat carrier with twin-gun mounts, a reinforced hull, and thick armor plating scorched from use in past conflicts. A forgotten relic of the War on Terror, but Curtis had kept it alive, rebuilt it, rearmed it, and renamed it Reckoner. The Mule's optics blinked to life, scanning the desert with heat mapping and biometric overlays. Within seconds, it isolated the squad of 6 PMCs fanning out from the disabled troop carrier. One of them crouched, peering through an optic. Targets acquired, a robotic voice announced, static-ridden but cold. The Mule locked onto 2 hostiles behind a rusted pickup. A second later, it unloaded a staggered burst from its dual M249S, controlled, deliberate, sweeping. The truck disintegrated in a hail of gunfire. Both operators went down before they even registered the threat. Curtis, now flanking the field from the south, watched as the tide shifted. 2 down, he muttered. 4 to go. He moved like a chess piece, not fast, but perfectly placed. Each step put him in cleaner sight lines, deeper cover, higher leverage. His mind wasn't just counting bullets. It was calculating risk, terrain, enemy fields of fire. It was second nature now. Across the field, one of the PMCs barked orders in English, tactical and clipped. Suppress right. Flank left. Advance on the trailer now. 3 of them surged forward. But they didn't realize. They were stepping into the kill box Curtis had pre-rigged. The field around the rig was laced with directional charges, non-lethal, but blinding. When the first man crossed the sensor line, a cascade of flashbangs burst from the dry ground in synchronized fire. Not random. Patterned. Curtis watched through polarized lenses. The mercs went down screaming, ears ringing, vision scorched white. Easy pickings. He dropped 2 with 3 shots. The last scrambled behind the trailer, breathing heavy. "You're not Cartel," Curtis called out. "You're hired hands. But you should know, whoever hired you didn't pay enough for what's coming." A long pause. Then the man replied, voice steady but rattled. "They said it was just a trucker. One guy? Nothing about drones. Nothing about this." Curtis moved toward him slowly, rifle lowered. "You've got gear. Training. Which means you've got survival instinct." The man peered out, eyes narrowed behind a cracked visor. "Who are you?" Curtis stopped. "Once. I was Ghost Transport Group. Black routes. No manifest. No flag. They called me Freight Dog. Beat. Now? I just drive." The PMC lowered his rifle slightly, then tossed it aside. Hands raised. Curtis nodded. "Good choice." From the ridge, a voice crackled over a long-range radio. Encrypted, masked. Phase 1 failed. Freight Dog is active. Initiate Phase 2. Bring the hammer. Curtis looked toward the horizon. He knew that phrase. Phase 2 meant they were done sending soldiers. Next, they'd send something worse. Curtis watched the fading sunlight bleed into the horizon like an open wound. The last embers of daylight flickered across the desert floor as silence settled. Temporary, fragile. He stood still, breathing slow, his back resting against the side of the trailer, eyes fixed westward. He knew the silence wasn't peace. It was the prelude. The voice on the radio hadn't said who was coming, just that the hammer was inbound. That was cartel code, but Curtis had heard it in another language, military dialect, buried under layers of deniable operations. The kind of teams that weren't listed in black budgets. Ghosts with teeth. He opened a side panel on the trailer and pulled out a dusty field satchel marked G2G, SOV/11. Inside, a stripped-down repeater drone, lighter than a football, designed for rapid uplink and overhead recon. With practiced hands, Curtis activated it, launched it, and stepped back. The drone zipped skyward, rising above the heat shimmer until it became a black dot against a bleeding orange sky. He whispered into his wrist mic. "Eye in the sky active. Scan full sector, thermal overlay, prioritize ground vehicles and low-flight aircraft." The drone responded with a faint beep and began its sweep. 10 seconds later, it painted the truth. Curtis studied the incoming telemetry on his field laptop. One vehicle, oversized, heavily armored, with 2 escort bikes flanking it on a tight diagonal spread. Not a convoy, a spearhead. No insignia, no plates, no IFF transponders. Pure ghost unit. "Damn," he muttered. "They're sending La Maza. The hammer. Not a code. A person. Luis La Maza Calderon. Former GAFE. Disavowed. Now a blunt weapon hired by high-tier cartel heads to clean up sensitive messes." He didn't talk. He didn't leave witnesses. He didn't chase, he cornered. And what made him dangerous wasn't the firepower. It was the precision. Tactical, clinical, unstoppable once deployed. Curtis clicked open a protected file on the laptop. Just one folder. Hammer file. Unconfirmed kills, 74. He'd faced Calderon once. In Najaf. Different name. Different flag. But the eyes were the same. This time, Curtis wasn't alone. He walked to the disarmed PMCs, still zip-tied beside the busted SUVs. One of them, older, scarred, maybe former Delta, looked up as Curtis approached. "You know who they're sending?" the man asked. Curtis nodded. "Yeah, and you do too." The PMC looked away. His silence said everything. "So," Curtis asked, "you want to sit this one out and die duct taped to a tree, or you want to earn your way out?" The man considered it, then said, simply, "I want my rifle back." Curtis cut him loose. "Good. Then gear up. Because we've got 7 minutes before La Maza shows up, and I don't plan on being here when he does." "Running?" "No," Curtis said, cracking open the side of the trailer to reveal the final secret. Folded armor panels, sat phones, and one more case labeled Valkyrie Sleeper Cell, classified. He turned back toward the PMC. "We're taking the fight to him." Curtis snapped open the Valkyrie case. Inside, not weapons, not armor, plans. Tactical overlays, encrypted dossiers, a black tablet etched with a faded government seal. One edge had been melted, the other bloodstained. Still worked. He powered it on, and the screen lit with a secure command prompt. Sierra 7, authorize Overwatch mode, he said, speaking to the dormant software like an old friend. A female voice replied, calm, British, artificial. Voice print confirmed. Valkyrie Overwatch Online. Welcome back, Freight Dog. Curtis looked up at the drone feed as 3 new heat signatures emerged on the ridgeline. Lamaz's unit, moving slow and wide, testing terrain. Classic. They're scouting. Not dumb. They want to see what's still breathing. He grabbed a piece of chalk and drew a wide U shape in the dirt beside the trailer, marking the ambush field. Around it, he dropped red stones, 1 for each choke point. Then he stood, pointed, and began assigning. You marksman. That hill, he said to the freed PMC. You, stay here, refit one of the SUVs with elevation. We'll need eyes. You, what's your specialty? The third guy, lean and quiet, simply replied. Demo. Curtis nodded. You're with me. As they moved, he laid out the plan with surgical clarity. Calderon will expect the rig to be the centerpiece. We're going to make it a decoy. That crate in the trailer? It's a kinetic dampener housing. Carries an internal shock system. We wire it and let him think it's the asset. When he breaches, we detonate a charge, trigger the smoke payload, and cut line of sight. The demo man raised a brow. You want to blind him inside the perimeter? I want to confuse him. You don't beat a hammer with brute force. You mislead it. The Overwatch PMC, now posted on a dune, called in. Visual confirmed. 3 tangos, 2 riders, 1 heavy. They're about 800 meters and closing fast. Curtis turned back toward the trailer and tossed a final switch. The panels around the rig began to retract, folding inward and pulling the drones back inside. The Mule 5 moved toward the center of the kill zone, resting like a tank ready to spring. Collapse the tech. We give them nothing to read. When they breach, they find only noise. The freed PMCs, now looking more like a unit than prisoners, nodded silently and fell into position. Curtis slung the scar over his shoulder and pulled out a modified P226 pistol from a concealed ankle holster. Laser sight. Subsonic rounds. He checked the chamber. Full. Then, with a glance at the fading sunset and a slow inhale through his nose, he muttered, let the hammer fall. The first shot came moments later. Pop. Suppressed, distant, precise. One of the escort bikers tumbled sideways, his body crumpling before the engine even hit the dirt. The convoy halted. Curtis smiled coldly. That's the welcome mat. The dust from the fallen rider hadn't even settled when the second escort peeled off hard left, drawing a wide arc around the kill zone. He didn't stop to check on his partner. He didn't slow. He knew what that shot meant. Lamaz's team wasn't surprised. They were activated. Curtis adjusted the mic on his wrist as the PMC sniper repositioned. First blood scored. They'll adapt. Hold fire on the second until he crosses stone marker Bravo. He's trying to flank wide. Copy. Wind steady. Waiting on your call, came the reply. Curtis crouched near the rear of the rig, eyes locked on the terrain. From the overhead drone feed, he watched Calderon's assault vehicle crawl to a halt at the base of the ridge. It was big, somewhere between an armored Suburban and a military Striker. Gun ports, ballistic glass, custom tires, thick enough to roll through an IED. The driver door opened. Out stepped Lamaza. No mask, no insignia, just a compact mountain of muscle wrapped in matte black combat gear. No wasted movement. He moved like a tactician, not a thug. Gloved hand rested on his sidearm, and slung over his shoulder was something else. A suppressed Chris Vector, matte gray and fitted with thermal optics. Curtis frowned. He's upgraded, he muttered. Lamaza didn't speak. He just scanned, searched for heat, for signs of movement. He took 3 steps forward, then raised a fist. Behind him, the rear doors of the vehicle opened. 2 more operators exited, both silent, both geared. One carried a drone jammer on a collapsible rig. The other wore a multiband comms set. Tech sweep team, Curtis said under his breath. They're here to sterilize the zone. Curtis tapped into Valkyrie. Activate decoy beacon. Push thermal bleed wide. Simulate multiple bodies around the trailer. Confirmed, the AI replied. Deploying Ghost Field. From the rig's outer panels, a faint pulse rippled out. It broadcasted low-frequency thermal noise, mimicking heat signatures around the trailer, painting false silhouettes into Calderon's scanner. La Maza paused. His eye twitched. He signaled. Two of his men moved toward the decoy readings, weapons high, formation tight. Hooks set, Curtis whispered. Reel them in. Then the flanker, on the far left, crossed Bravo. Take the shot, Curtis ordered. Crack. This time, the shot wasn't suppressed. A full-powered .308 echoed across the valley like thunder. The biker pitched forward, bike flipping midair before skidding lifeless into a rock outcrop. Dust bloomed. A warning shot for those still breathing. The comms operator snapped into action. He ducked and called for signal sweep. The drone jammer flared. Valkyrie's link stuttered, momentarily disoriented. They're pushing suppression, the Overwatch sniper warned. Curtis didn't blink. Expected. Switching to line Bravo fallback. Drones go dark. He flipped a second switch. The drones powered down instantly, hiding all traces of transmission. What Calderon would see now was a battlefield filled with ghosts, but no movement. That's when Curtis moved. He sprinted low and fast along the irrigation ditch he'd scouted hours earlier. Dry, narrow, but perfect for flanking. The demo PMC followed 5 yards behind, hauling a satchel packed with custom charges. Tell me we're not going in there, the demo man muttered. Curtis glanced back. We're not going in. He paused. We're leading him in. The desert wind howled low across the flats, stirring dust and tension alike. La Maza's men moved with caution now, deliberate, sweeping. One of them knelt to scan the sand with a compact, ground-penetrating radar wand. He shook his head. No pressure plates. No wires. Exactly as Curtis intended. From beneath the ditch's shadow, Curtis watched the enemy spread toward the trailer, drawn to its stillness like moths to a cold fire. The decoy field was holding. Ghost heat signatures flickered through La Maza's thermal scope, each one slightly blurred, as if they were just shifting in place. Unsettling. Purposeful. Valkyrie, Curtis whispered. Initiate echo overlay. Add ghost walk patterns. Shuffle. Confirmed. Walking pattern initiated. Movement synced. Now, through Calderon's lens, the heat signatures didn't just exist. They moved. Just barely. Enough to suggest pacing figures. Trained eyes know what they see, but what they can't explain. That breeds hesitation. Calderon didn't hesitate. He raised 2 fingers, gave a silent, fan-out gesture. His men complied. Curtis took that moment to move again, crawling up the ditch bank and into the shadow of a long-buried irrigation trench. Deeper cover. The demo specialist beside him kept low, sweat trailing down his temple. You sure he won't breach the trailer early? The demo asked. No, Curtis said bluntly. But if he does, he dies inside it. A moment passed. You know him? Curtis nodded slowly. I trained him. Once. Back when he had a flag and a country. The demo man looked stunned. So why's he working for them now? Because somewhere along the line, Curtis said, voice low, he stopped asking who the enemy was. They moved farther along the trench. 10 meters ahead, a small concrete rise jutted out, remnants of a drainage grate. The perfect observation point. Curtis knelt, raised the monocular. Now Calderon was 10 meters from the trailer. His men surrounded it, rifles ready. Curtis whispered into the radio. Set charges Alpha and Bravo. High dust, low concussive. Paint the area in smoke and noise. The demo man pulled a pair of compact thermite satchels from his rig, slid them up the grade, and armed both. Set. Curtis pulled out a battered remote detonator. He looked at the clock. For minutes since contact. They were right on schedule. One of Calderon's men approached the trailer doors. He reached for the latch. Curtis exhaled. Now. Boom, boom. The desert flashed with sudden violence. Plumes of gray smoke erupted outward, a controlled explosion that blanketed everything in fine dust and static. Visibility dropped to near zero. From within the chaos came coughing, shouting, and the scatter of boots scrambling for cover. Curtis rolled out of the trench and moved in. Every step was choreographed. The enemy was disoriented. One operator staggered out of the smoke, rifle raised. Curtis dropped him with a silent double tap. Another turned, panicked, blind. He fell before he knew where the shots came from. Valkyrie, deploy drone light mode. Flash strobe. Psychological suppression. Affirmative. Tiny quadrones burst from the trailer like hornets, flickering bright white pulses, blinding in the smoke. Curtis advanced deeper into the chaos. He wanted Calderon to feel it, the fear of uncertainty. But Calderon was already adapting. He dropped to a crouch in the middle of the chaos, eyes closed, breathing steady. When he opened them, he fired twice. One drone fell. "There you are," he whispered. Then he stood and started walking right toward Curtis. Curtis saw him through the smoke. Calderon, calm and steady, walking straight into the kill zone as if the chaos was just weather. He held the Chris vector low, scanning with precise sweeps. The tactical mask now covered half his face, eyes unreadable behind mirrored lenses. "Valkyrie, isolate his position." "Full thermal lock," Curtis muttered. "Target located." 17 meters, closing. The distance was shrinking fast. Curtis ducked behind a rusted-out engine block from a broken-down irrigation pump, heart steady, breathing deep. He could hear the crunch of Calderon's boots in the dust, rhythmic, deliberate. No fear, just pressure, the kind that never stops. "You know this dance," Curtis whispered to himself. "Pick your tempo." He turned to the demo man crouched nearby, signaling toward the far ridge. "Fall back to secondary position. If I don't signal in 90 seconds, initiate fallback route and detonate the ridge charges." "Understood." "You sure about staying?" Curtis just gave a tired grin. "I've been waiting to finish this for 15 years. The demo man vanished into the dust. Curtis turned back to face the sound of slow, heavy steps. Then, silence. Too quiet. Curtis raised his sidearm slowly, angling for center mass on the next visible shape. But nothing moved. Not a footstep. Not a breath. Then a voice, calm, accented, cutting through the smoke like a scalpel. "You taught me that trick, old man. Mask the sound of your steps with the wind. Predict your enemy's heartbeat." Curtis froze. Calderon was behind him. He pivoted hard, too late. The vector cracked off 2 suppressed rounds. One grazed his upper arm, the other punched clean through his shoulder. Curtis dropped to one knee, the world tilting. "You didn't bring enough fire this time," Calderon said from the fog, close but still hidden. Curtis forced a laugh, despite the pain blooming hot through his shoulder. "You always talk too soon, Calderon." He reached under the engine block, grabbed a prepositioned flash mine, and slammed it into the dirt. Blam! A white-hot burst flared between them. Curtis dove sideways, one arm useless, and rolled behind a dune, pulling his scar into firing position with his left hand. "Valkyrie," he hissed, teeth clenched. "Engage fallback units. Remote cover fire." Confirmed. Unit Bravo online. The ridge behind the trailer came to life. Twin pop-up turrets emerged, compact, AI-controlled, linked to Curtis's biometrics. Their targeting systems locked and sprayed suppressive fire toward Calderon's last known location. Tat 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 tat. Bullets tore the smoke apart. Calderon was forced to break his advance, ducking behind a stalled SUV. Curtis, panting, pressed a clotting patch to his shoulder and cursed under his breath. The pain was sharp, real, but it also gave him clarity. This wasn't a mission anymore. It was personal. He keyed the mic. "All units, this is Freight Dog. I'm compromised. Phase 3 is go." The freed PMCs replied in staggered tones. "Copy. Engaging grid collapse. Charges set. Ridge prepped. We're with you, old man." Curtis stared toward Calderon's shadow moving through the fading smoke. "Let's end this." Curtis gritted his teeth as he tied off the pressure bandage. His shoulder burned like fire, but the pain was clean. Contained. Manageable. He'd bled worse in countries no one could pronounce. What mattered now was time. And positioning. Over the comms, the last pieces of Phase 3 fell into place. Grid collapse set. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie lines all armed. Drone relay offline, but fallback timers are synced. Curtis pushed himself to standing, one arm limp, the other clutching the scar tight to his chest. The smoke had thinned, revealing the trailer again, its once pristine surface now pocked with bullet marks, singed by flash blasts, but still standing. Still bait. He climbed the nearest rise overlooking the canyon. Below, the PMCs moved into final position, each armed with reclaimed Cartel rifles, bodies low, trained. No longer hired hands. Now they were soldiers again. On the far ridge, Calderon moved with terrifying calm, now flanked by just one remaining operative, the comms tech, hunched and sweating as he scanned frequencies with a dish antenna. The others were dead or incapacitated. Curtis watched them through the scope. Valkyrie confirmed target identity. Calderon confirmed. Vital signs steady. Heart rate elevated but controlled. No visible injuries. Of course not. He's running on protocol, Curtis muttered. Not adrenaline. He zoomed in. Calderon stopped. Kneeling beside a discarded Cartel rifle, he picked it up, tested the weight, checked the magazine, and then looked directly at Curtis's position. He sees me. And then Calderon did something strange. He lifted the rifle and laid it flat on the ground. Slowly, deliberately. A gesture. Curtis blinked. What the hell are you doing? A static buzz hit the comms. An encrypted channel opened. Curtis hadn't used it in 12 years. Only one other person had the handshake. Freight dog, the voice crackled. You built a good trap, but you're still bleeding. And I still owe you. Curtis stiffened. It was Calderon. He wasn't taunting. He was offering something. Stand down, Calderon said. Let me walk away with the crate. Just the crate. No chase. No more bodies. Curtis glanced at the rig. The crate inside was worthless. Just tech scrap and lead shielding. A decoy. He smiled coldly. You think that box is what this is about? I think that's what your handlers want you to think. I have no handlers, Curtis snapped. Not anymore. Then why do you still fight like you're being watched? Curtis didn't answer. Instead, he spoke to the PMCs. Charlie team, collapse the ridge. Detonate when I say. One of the ex-operators replied immediately. Charges armed. Just say the word. Calderon rose to his feet. You always hated gray areas, he said. Always needed the world to make sense. Curtis stared through the scope. I don't need the world to make sense. What do you need? A moment of clarity. And then he whispered. Now. Boom, boom, boom. The ridge erupted in a controlled cascade. Dirt, rock, and flames spewed skyward as the canyon wall collapsed on itself. The entire western flank, their only exit, was now a funnel of debris and fire. Curtis dropped to cover, one hand pressed to his earpiece. Confirm impact. Targets. Silence. Then, no movement. Signals cut. We got him. Curtis didn't smile. Didn't gloat. He simply leaned back against the scorched dirt, breathing in dust and smoke. One way or another, he muttered. The hammer broke. Curtis sat still for a long moment, his back against the earth, watching ash spiral in the desert air. The ridge was gone, obliterated in a sequence of concussive folds and smoke columns. A surgical collapse. One he designed years ago in Kandahar, adapted now for this forsaken strip of Mexico. But even perfect traps don't guarantee clean kills. Valkyrie, he whispered. Thermal scan. Confirm life signs in the debris. Processing. He waited. Dust drifted. The sun dipped lower. The air grew still. Then, one faint heat signature. Location, beneath debris pocket. Vital signs unstable but present. Curtis's jaw clenched. Of course. Luis Calderon had survived. Because of course he had. Bring up visuals. The overhead drone, back online via satellite sync, hovered silently, relaying a shaky image. A shallow crevasse formed in the ridge collapse, with a partial metal shield wedged above it. Likely the wrecked convoy's ballistic panel. It had shielded Calderon from the worst. He was pinned, barely breathing, but alive. Curtis stared at the image for a long beat, then rose to his feet, shoulders still burning. Prep Medivac, one of the PMCs asked. Curtis shook his head. No, not yet. He slung the scar over his back, grabbed a satchel charge, and began walking, slow and steady, toward the impact site. I trained him, he muttered. I'll finish it. It took 10 minutes to reach the crater. The smoke was thick, and the air tasted of copper and powder. Shattered metal jutted from the ground like broken ribs. And beneath one jagged slab, he saw him, Luis Calderon, bleeding, breathing shallow, one arm bent at the wrong angle. The Chris vector gone, a cracked lens over his right eye, but still alive. Curtis approached silently, lowering the rifle. Calderon stirred. His voice was gravel. Didn't think you'd come to say goodbye. Curtis crouched. Didn't come to say anything. Calderon coughed. Wet, sharp. All of this, it wasn't for a crate. It wasn't for your pride. You came for me. Curtis said nothing. So what now? Calderon rasped. Gun to the head. Prison cell. Curtis glanced at the broken ridge above them. Neither. I'm giving you a choice. He placed the satchel charge beside Calderon, slow and deliberate. I walk away. In 5 minutes, the timer hits 0. Calderon blinked, blood trailing from his mouth. And if I crawl out before that? Curtis stood. Then maybe you still want to live. But if you do, you disappear. Forever. No more names. No more contracts. No more war. Calderon chuckled faintly. It hurt. You think I'm afraid of dying? Curtis looked down. No. But you're afraid of not matching anymore. That's worse. He turned, walked away. Never looked back. 5 minutes. The desert was silent. Behind him, nothing moved. Not yet. Curtis moved like a ghost across the broken desert, passing the trailer, his battered rig now silent, its panels sealed, drones powered down. The freed PMCs were packing gear into the least damaged SUV, eyes flicking between the ridgeline and the man who had just walked out of it. Status? One asked, nodding toward the ridge. It's over, Curtis said flatly. They didn't press for details. The kind of silence that follows real war. The demo man approached, dust-streaked and tense. We've got a problem. Curtis raised an eyebrow. Another one? The man handed him a tablet, pulled from one of the downed Cartel vehicles. A cracked military-grade model. Inside, a map overlay. A location blinking. Not here. Farther north. An old missile silo. Curtis's eyes narrowed. That's not Cartel turf. No. But the data packet inside this shows encrypted comms. Same frequency their tech was jamming earlier. Curtis swiped through. Then he stopped. One image, a grainy satellite capture. The same rig. His rig. Parked outside that silo. Weeks ago. He stared. Cold realization creeping in. They weren't after the crate. They were testing the driver. The PMCs looked confused. You mean you? Curtis nodded. They wanted to see if I'd activate. Use old protocols. Access Valkyrie. That's what they were tracking. He looked north. Toward the silo. Toward whatever was waiting. They flushed me out. This wasn't the objective. The demo man blinked. So what is? Curtis's voice was flat steel. The next one. He opened the back of the rig and began stripping out all non-essential gear. He kept the SCAR, the suppressed P226, 2 knives, 1 medical kit, and a small bag of satchel charges. Get to the border. Cross into Arizona. Drop the rig with the fallback contact in Yuma. And you? The sniper asked. Curtis strapped the gear tight and pulled a desert cloak over his shoulders. I'm going hunting. He stopped, then turned back to them. You don't owe me anything. You walk now. You've done more than enough. But the oldest PMC stepped forward. No one calls a hunt alone anymore, freight dog. He grinned, cracked his knuckles. Besides, you'll need a driver. Your arm's shot. Another piped up. And I've got unfinished business with whoever trained those PMCs. Curtis gave a rare half-smile. Then suit up. They loaded weapons. Rechecked gear. Curtis tapped the satellite link into the damaged tablet and broadcast one final signal. Encrypted, narrowband, bounced through 3 dead satellites. The message? Ghost Transport Group, reactivated. Then he looked to the horizon, toward the silo, the truth, the real enemy still waiting in the shadows. Let's finish what they started. The desert night settled like a shroud over the forgotten basin. Shadows clung to rusted fences and collapsed control towers. The air was dry, charged with static, like something ancient had woken. Curtis watched the horizon narrow into blackness as their convoy, just 2 vehicles now, descended into the old missile site. His rig was stripped bare of payloads and signals. No tech, no drones, just steel, wheels, and a legend behind the wheel. The second vehicle, a commandeered Cartel SUV, was now armed with a makeshift launcher and lined with armor pulled from broken PMC units. A Frankenstein ride, perfect for what was coming. Inside, men sat in silence. Curtis, shotgun seat, shoulder bound tight under ballistic mesh. Behind him, Demo ran a systems check on two shaped charges, compact, clean, and mean. The sniper-turned-spotter scanned thermal overlays through a monocle rig patched into an old Army drone lens. And behind the wheel, the ex-Delta driver, hands steady, eyes forward. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The approach to the silo was surgical. They drove without lights, coasting on gravity where they could, moving in a staggered offset to confuse thermal tracks. 20 meters out, Curtis raised a clenched fist. The vehicles braked in tandem, stopping just outside a gravel-lined perimeter fence that had once bristled with Cold War defenses. Now, the towers were crumbling. But the tech was newer. Motion sensors, the driver whispered. Infrared. Fake low-band jammers. They're dirty but functional. Cartel didn't build that, Demo added. That's contractor work. U.S. black budget grade. Probably ex-NSA or DARPA trash turned freelance. Curtis crouched by the fence line, ran a hand across a buried fiber optic wire. Patchwork security. No perimeter patrols, which means their defense is deeper. Probably betting on bottlenecks and kill zones inside. He tapped the Valkyrie tablet, still jury-rigged and barely operational, but enough to pulse out a local scan. The system pinged the topography. 5 surface structures. 1 radar dish, non-functional. 3 hatches. 1 active elevator shaft, center of the basin. That's our door, Curtis said, eyes locking on the primary hatch. They split. Demo peeled off toward the east utility building, setting charges to blow the comm grid. The sniper moved to a high outcrop with thermal and a field of fire across the basin. Curtis and the driver crept toward the hatch, keeping low, rifles cold. The access panel blinked. Still live. Curtis stared at it. Muscle memory took over. He punched in a 6-digit code. Nothing. Then 4 more. Pause. 2 taps on the override port. A soft beep, then a click. The door hissed open. Inside was a tunnel. Steel, narrow, sloped downward at a 20-degree angle. The walls were lined with 1970s concrete, aged and cracked, but newer conduits had been mounted. Fiber, coax, even embedded drones. They've been here for years, Curtis muttered. They moved in silently. 30 meters in, the air changed. Cooler. Sterile. The hum of generators thrummed behind the walls like a heartbeat. Then they saw it. A massive gray container, stamped with the seal Curtis hadn't seen in decades. Ghost Transport Group. Do not open except under Directive 9. It wasn't cartel property. It wasn't stolen cargo. It was a coffin for secrets, for programs erased from official records. Before Curtis could speak, the lights cut. Total blackout. Then a voice filled the dark. Calm. Deep. Not cartel. Not foreign. American. Freight dog, you should have stayed retired. The voice echoed through the blackened tunnel, cold and deliberate. A ghost from Curtis's past materializing before him. Freight dog, you should have stayed retired. Curtis's hand tightened around the grip of his scar, every muscle coiled, every sense sharpened. The darkness pressed in, but he didn't waver. And you should have stayed buried, Curtis replied, his voice low, edged with years of bitterness. Slowly, a faint light flickered to life on the container's surface, illuminating a screen filled with scrolling encrypted data, unintelligible to anyone but those with clearance. Then, with a hiss that sounded like the breath of a sleeping beast, a hatch in the container slid open. Out stepped a figure cloaked in shadow, tall, authoritative, and chilling. Director Kane, the elusive intelligence officer who had pulled strings in the background for decades, his eyes sharp and unreadable. We never intended for you to fight this war, Freight Dog, Kane said, voice calm but commanding. You were meant to be the sleeper, the safeguard. But you went rogue. Curtis's eyes burned with fury and pain. I'm no safeguard. I'm the reckoning. Kane's lips curled into a thin, cold smile. This silo houses Valkyrie's core, advanced drones, surveillance tech stolen from Black Ops projects. The cartel's reach was a symptom, a testbed for something far bigger. Curtis's jaw clenched tightly. So you use them as puppets, pulling the strings when convenient? Power requires pragmatism, Kane replied smoothly. The cartel was just phase 1, proof of concept for our control network. Control? Curtis spat. You mean tyranny disguised as order? Necessary order. Curtis stepped forward despite the burning ache in his shoulder, unwavering. Then I'm here to burn it all down. Suddenly, alarms shattered the silence. Red strobes flashed violently, illuminating the concrete walls. Automated turrets sprang from hidden recesses, targeting the team with lethal precision. Phase Omega initiated, Kane announced coldly. Leave now, or die here. Curtis raised his rifle, voice steely. Then let's see who's left standing. Gunfire erupted, sharp, echoing, deadly, as Curtis and his team moved in seamless coordination. Every shot counted, every maneuver calculated. The battle was savage, a deadly dance in the cold concrete belly of the silo. When the final turret fell silent, and the echoes faded, Curtis approached the open container once more. He keyed the override, revealing a trove of classified files and tech, secrets that could unravel governments. He looked to his team, their faces grim but resolute. This fight isn't just against cartels. It's against the whole system. Lifting a data drive, Curtis's voice hardened with resolve. Time to wake the world.